Star Wars prequels. We can't get enough of them, and that's because we have no choice. If you're watching something Star Wars related, chances are it's a prequel of some kind.
Hello there.
Hello there.
Hello there.
More than most, this is a franchise very committed to showing us the origins of various characters and events years after we're familiar with them, and as you know, some work better than others. When a new day aged for the Star Wars galaxy with the release of The Force Awakens in 2015, it was quickly followed by Rogue One, which depicted the daring mission to steal the plans for the Death Star by members of the Rebel Alliance, these events obviously leading directly up to A New Hope. A year and a half later, we got Solo, a look at a formative time in the life of everyone's favorite space scoundrel, Han Solo. Opinions of these films still run the gamut, both have their highs and lows, and for better or worse, they fill holes in the overall mythology of the series and are now considered canon. Also, if you enjoy discussing these topics and watching content such as this, why don't you hit a like on this video and subscribe to our channel? So, which one would prevail in an outright duel? We're gonna find out as we toss Rogue One and Solo into the Sarlacc pit and see which one makes it out alive in this edition of Face Off.
Disclaimer. No actual science was used to determine the outcome of Face Off. Your results may vary. Please do not consume Face Off if you are allergic to conjecture, opinion, or general nonsense.
Round 1, a Star Wars story. As mentioned, both films take a look at important events that took place before the legendary original trilogy. Rogue One answers questions some fans had for years. How exactly did the Rebels get their hands on the plans for the Death Star? Not to mention, why was the Death Star outfitted with such a vulnerable portal in which to destroy it, in which, of course, Luke Skywalker accomplishes at the end of A New Hope? Turns out it was thanks to a predictably ragtag group of headstrong rebels, ultimately led by the cynical Jyn Erso, whose father helped design the Death Star before he defected. Jyn and her comrades have to jump through several dangerous hoops before getting their hands on the Death Star schematics and messaging them to the Rebel Alliance, but their victory is a bittersweet one as the Death Star blows up the planet they're on, killing them in the process, but not the success of their mission. Solo looks at the maturation of young Han, who's depicted as a brash, impulsive daredevil pilot with a heart of gold. So they weren't exactly rewriting the legacy of the character here. We see that Han's desire for money and freedom to do whatever he wants is only overmatched by the pure romantic in him, as his one real goal is to be reunited with his love, Kira. Han falls in with some questionable characters of varying morals, including mercenary Tobias Beckett, a helpful and somewhat familiar Wookiee by the name of Chewbacca, and the stylish rogue known as Lando Calrissian. Getting mixed up in a plan to steal a hyperfuel called coaxium for a deadly crime boss, Dryden Voss, Han ultimately ends up helping a small band of rebels defeat the crime syndicate, hence launching his future as a reluctant hero who's still determined to help himself out whenever possible. Whether or not these movies were necessary isn't the debate here, rather which one told the better story and added more to the overall mythology of the Star Wars franchise. It's arguable that Solo really didn't add much and feels like the more superfluous entry. We could have already guessed what Han Solo was like as a young man, and his run-ins with random crime syndicates aren't particularly enlightening or thrilling, though you may have delighted in seeing how he first came connected with Chewie and Lando. Meanwhile, the question of how the Rebels managed to get their hands on the schematics of the Death Star may have felt unnecessary for some. Rogue One packs plenty of enjoyable character moments and revelations, in addition to giving us a good look at how small and desperate the rebellion really was, not to mention how determined. We're giving this first round to Jyn Erso and company. Verdict? Rogue One. Round 2, protagonists. Felicity Jones's Jyn may well be the main character in Rogue One, but it's also fair to say she's part of an ensemble which certainly aids the film, as Jyn's churlish personality in the front half isn't the most welcoming. Her strongest alliance is eventually with Diego Luna's Cassian Andor, who's depicted as a potentially ruthless member of the rebellion capable of doing anything he must to take down the Empire. As we get to know them a little better, both characters soften up to transform into heroes we can really root for. Comic relief comes in the form of K2SO and a reprogrammed Imperial droid, but We'll highlight him a little later. There's also a high-strung pilot, Bodhi Rook, played by Riz Ahmed, another former member of the Empire, and 2 members of a religious order whose destiny it is to protect a Jedi temple, played by Donnie Yen and Zhang Wen, a diverse and rather formidable team we grow to appreciate. Their uneasy camaraderie, not to mention their bold suicide mission to help save the galaxy from the forces of evil. They may not be the icons of the franchise, but they absolutely leave their mark on the timeline. Han Solo is one of the greatest characters in movie history, so it goes that we only associate him with one man, Harrison Ford, who effortlessly delivered the traits that define the character. Cocky fearlessness mixed in with kindness and reluctant vulnerability. As played here by Alden Ehrenreich, we find that indeed Han was just as brazen as ever when he was a young smuggler. Even then, he was a secret romantic at heart. The object of his affection is Kira, played by Game of Thrones alum Emilia Clarke, a character conflicted by multiple allegiances. Donald Glover is absolutely perfect as young Lando, suave, sneaky.
Making love in space. Yeah, making love in space. You need a man though. Girl, come see Lando.
Possessing the best poker face in the galaxy. And then there's Tobias Beckett, played by a well-cast Woody Harrelson, a true scoundrel whose only friend is whoever gets him what he wants. Beckett is a look at what Han Solo would be like if he didn't have inherently noble tendencies, but his mercenary nature surely rubs off some on his young protege. The characters of the Star Wars movies are at the core of their appeal, and while neither Rogue One or Solo have protagonists as beloved as those in the original trilogy, they're interesting enough to hold our attention, and plenty of that has to do with how well cast they are. Though Solo has Han Solo in it, he doesn't put it over the top because Alden Ehrenreich simply can't inhabit the role the way Harrison Ford did. We're gonna give a tie to this round. Verdict? Die. Round 3, Scum and Villainy. Just as important as the heroes in these tales are the villains, and Star Wars has had some very memorable ones in the past. Of course, the Empire is front and center in Rogue One, mostly personified by Orson Krennic, as played by Ben Mendelsohn. Krennic is a petty, megalomaniacal tyrant who's just as obsessed with his own status as he is with wiping out the rebellion. Mendelsohn is excellent at playing bad guys, and he handily makes Krennic an instantly despicable creep who we can't wait to see cut down to size. Along for the ride is an unappealing CGI rendering of Peter Cushing's Tarkin, who we never really take seriously as a character here, and of course, a couple of effective cameos from Darth Vader himself, back in the days when he was full-on evil and loved dispatching rebels with the Force. The Empire will always be an intimidating foe, so the threat definitely feels real in Rogue One. The question of who the villains really are in Solo is often tough, as it's difficult to trust anyone outside of Han and his sidekick Chewie. Ostensibly, the main villain is Paul Bettany's Dryden Voss, a Scarface gangster who runs a shady outfit called Crimson Dawn. Bettany doesn't get to do a whole lot with the character, and as filmed by Ron Howard, Voss often doesn't even feel like he's in a Star Wars movie. His threat barely registers, and he's easily one of the most forgettable aspects of the movie. There's no real contest on this one, as the Empire and the insidious Orson Krennic take the day. Verdict? Rogue One. Round 4, action sequences. Both of these films do boast a handful of exciting set pieces that ought to please any Star Wars fan, even if said fan isn't crazy about the movies themselves. Rogue One has a few legitimately exciting sequences, including a critical fight on Jeddah and its subsequent destruction, the devastation of Galen Erso's research facility on Yaddle, and his demise. Of course, the epic battle on Scarif between the Rebels and the Empire as the Rogue One unit steals the Death Star plans, and we can't leave out that thrilling sequence at the end where we get to watch Darth Vader do his thing in grand fashion, annihilating the Rebels in arguably the movie's greatest scene. There's some very enjoyable and meaningful action in Rogue One. Solo has several action sequences throughout. Some are more exciting than others. Perhaps the highlight of the entire movie is a superb space train robbery where Han and his band of outlaws attempt to steal cargo while fending off bandits. It's one of the more rousing sequences in any of the new Star Wars films. Han meeting Chewie for the first time and their subsequent escape from prison camp is a good scene and a vivid depiction of Han's legendary Kessel Run, complete with killer black hole and space monster, is fun to behold. Sadly, the movie truly lacks an exciting conclusion as Han's final confrontation with Dryden Voss leaves much to be desired. Both movies bring forth some eye-popping visuals and get our hearts beating with satisfying action scenes, though because Rogue One's finale is so striking, it will come out the victor. Verdict: Rogue One. Round 5, Aliens and Droids. No Star Wars movie would be complete without an impressive array of eclectic aliens, fearsome creatures, and comical androids. Rogue One certainly has one of the latter category, with K2SO, as played by Alan Tudyk, proving to be a sardonic, chippy member of our ensemble. Droid shenanigans can sometimes wear thin in the Star Wars universe, but K2 is an agreeable addition to the movie, which can often be a fairly dour affair. On the creature front, there's a tentacled, mind-reading alien and a Mon Calamari relative to Admiral Akbar, who helps the Alliance, but for the majority of the time, Rogue One isn't concerned with the many different species of aliens that exist in this world, and it surely paved the way for Disney Plus's Andor in that it's more focused on the human factor than a litany of weird beasts. Conversely, Solo does have a bevy of aliens and droids to show off. It's got multiple Wookiees, a frightening thing called the Suma Verminoth that almost ruins the Falcon's Kessel Run, and Jon Favreau-voiced Rio Durant, who's a helpful fellow. If it's droids you're looking for, Solo has those too. In fact, an entire droid uprising led by Lando's sassy second-in-command and possible love interest, L3. Thanks to these nifty creations, this is one category that Solo can safely claim as its own. Round 6, Behind the Scenes Turmoil. Handed to both of these films, they had a lot of trouble behind the scenes and came out of the turmoil in one piece bent, but not broken. In the case of Rogue One, shooting had wrapped in February of 2016 with the release scheduled for that December. But at the end of May, it was announced that Disney had ordered about 5 weeks of reshoots on the film after rumors that the initial cut was tonally off and the story needed work. Oscar-nominated writer-director Tony Gilroy was brought on to write new material and oversee the editing of the film, with original director Gareth Edwards working alongside him. Gilroy had contributed uncredited work on Edwards' Godzilla, so apparently the two got along well with no reported friction. The real trouble was getting the main cast back together months after they had disbanded and started work on other projects. But the new footage was ultimately captured, and though the timing was tight, the film finished post-production a couple of weeks before its December 16th unveiling. John Gilroy, brother of Tony, has also gone on record to confirm that the aforementioned scene in which Vader goes full Sith berserker mode on the rebel soldiers was also a part of these reshoots. On the surface, however, the film bears very little evidence of problems behind the scenes. Solo had a much different and arguably more difficult set of challenges to face during production. Original directors Phil Lord and Chris Miller were let go from the film months into production, with Lucasfilm and directors citing creative differences. Reportedly, Lord and Miller's sensibilities and directing style clashed with Lucas's film's head honcho, Kathleen Kennedy, as well as writer-producer Lawrence Kasdan, leading to an unhappy marriage for all. Days after the firing, Ron Howard was announced as the new director for the remaining month of production. One of the major changes involved the film's villain. Michael K. Williams had already shot all of his scenes and had moved on, hence he was not available for new work under Howard's direction. Williams was recast with Paul Bettany, a frequent collaborator of Howard's, who wound up flying to England 2 weeks after the director was hired to shoot the new character scenes, which were reportedly wholly different than what had been shot by Lord and Miller. A brand new editor was hired as well to reshape the material. Though the film is certainly watchable, there are hints that the production wasn't a smooth one throughout. Solo often comes across as a half-baked concept that needed much more time in the oven. Verdict: Rogue One. When it comes to the battle of these Star Wars prequels, Rogue One easily defeats Solo thanks to a more intriguing story, a much better third act, and a clearer overall vision. Solo isn't a waste of time, some people may have written it off as, but it's still not up to par with the best of the series, certainly not up to the standards of our favorite stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder. Final verdict. Rogue One. Till next time, may the Force be with you.